Hi, Angelica. This is Ira, and I am recording here some audio feedback on your statement of belief that I hope will be helpful as you're completing your final work on the larger major essay for the course, Defining Good Argument in Digital Contexts. So, I really like where you're starting out here. I mean, obviously you have not, gotten fully into the working out of the ideas. This is just an initial kind of sense of how you're thinking about it to start off with. But I think you're starting off with some useful perspectives. So I want to highlight some of the things I think you're doing well here that are worth really following up on, and I also want to kind of push you on a couple things that might not be that need to be worked out more as you move into the larger theoretical essay. So, right off the bat, I like that you define false arguments as statements that have a strong opinion but no other points. So what I take you to mean, and I would want you to kind of clarify that a little bit more, but what I take you to mean is basically when somebody just says something and that something is meant to stand on its own without necessarily referencing a shared reality or specifically articulating any larger world that an audience would be able to test the correctness or incorrectness or goodness or badness of the argument. That's at least what I take this to mean based on the fact that you used Trump's Twitter account as the primary example of it. So I think that the way that leads you to to this way of thinking about what arguments are for and what they should have. So they should have substance and structure in order to be persuasive. And you quickly caveat, it's not to say that every argument should lead to an opinion that's persuaded, but it should have that aspect. And I think that's an interesting way to think about persuasion. So as I take you, you're not necessarily saying that good argument requires that the audience be persuaded, but that it does have at least an aspect of persuasiveness. It orients in that way, in some way. I think that's really interesting, and I also want to kind of push you on that. Explain more about what is that? What does that mean? How does that work? What's that about? Here I was a little confused. Each argument that is stated into the space we put it, whether that space is physical, in a conversation, or digital, like in an online comment section, they deserve the respect of being heard. And so I'm not sure, really? Like, even false arguments also deserve to be heard? I'm a little confused here. So when you're starting off, you're kind of giving us a sense that false arguments are sort of just garbage statements. They're not really, there's no substance, there's no special structure, there's not really much that should make it persuasive. Although, if you're thinking about Trump's Twitter account, that's very persuasive to many people. Even if maybe it shouldn't be, it is. And that seems like something to think about. Anyways, though, I'm curious why you say that any argument deserves the respect of being heard. Or if you would stand behind that. Is it only good arguments that deserve respect? Do arguments deserve respect regardless of whether they're good or bad? Why? Or why not? So then you kind of specify things a little bit more. You say a good argument has fact, persuasion, and coherence. So without these three components, there's nothing but an opinion. And I like that distinction between argument and opinion. So arguments have facts, they have persuasion, they have coherence to them in some way. And what I would want to see you do more is talk about what exactly makes a fact. Of what does a fact consist? How do we know when an argument is factual? How do we determine that? Especially in hotly contested cases. What exactly is persuasion as you understand it? What does it mean to be persuasive? And Aristotle might be helpful there. And then finally, what do you mean by coherence? What is coherence? So I would want to see you, kind of in your larger theoretical essay, really do a lot more definitional work, clarifying, communicating what these things are, how they fit together, and why they make for good argument. What about that collection of things makes an argument good and not just an opinion? You say that they're needed to, because they make an argument have some kind of validity, but fine, cool, what's validity? And I'm not just asking that just to ask that. I think, thinking through how these all fit together, how they relate to validity, what validity is, that's the essence of theoretical work. We're trying to understand how all the pieces fit together. And I think you do a great job of thinking about the ways in which failure to offer good argument can be problematic. I mean, and you talk about it a lot in terms of how failing to offer good arguments really affects how people listen to you. Excuse me. How and whether people listen to you and whether they're able to make a connection with your argument. I think it's kind of cool. And I like the idea that listening is something that actually makes us better arguers. But I'm also wanting to push you here too to make the connection a little clearer. What's the relationship between an argument that prompts listening and an argument that comes from rhetorical listening? How are those things related as you see it? And why does rhetorical listening make for arguments proper and not just opinions? What exactly does this quote from Krista Ratcliffe mean? I like the way that you're kind of thinking through what are the things that you want as an arguer. But I also, I want to kind of ask you to think about, so cool, but how does all this work in an online space, right? It's one thing if you're having an extended argument with a friend, you're thinking things through together, or your partner, or a family member. But what about when you're talking with some anonymous stranger online in some capacity? In a comment section? What about when you're watching two other people talk, but you're not actually engaged? What is it that you're looking for? What does listening, rhetorical listening in Ratcliffe's sense, look like in that context? A lot of the verbal cues that we offer in our kind of back and forth aren't available in digital spaces. And so how do we sort of make up for those, or what do we put in their place to really practice rhetorical listening in the ways that you're laying out here? And you do, you kind of use Instagram to start thinking through that, right? You say, take Instagram, for example. It's very easy for people to look at the photo and make a simple opinion, write it out, and post it. But it takes a lot for somebody to look at a comment and respond in a way that is educated and well thought out, which is fair enough and cool. And I like the way that you're thinking about how the digital format itself prompts certain ways of thinking or communicating. I think that's great, and you're thinking about this in a lot of the ways that are important for this class and for for the defining good argument in digital contexts essay. And at the same time, I want to know more about, well, okay, fine, but what exactly makes a comment there good? What makes a comment educated and well thought out? What does that look like? How do you know that somebody's practicing rhetorical listening there? Can a short comment be one that's practicing rhetorical listening, or does it have to be a long one? Are there some formats or media platforms that make it impossible to offer good argument? Or can you offer some kind of good argument in almost any context? And so I think those are kind of questions that, as you think about them for your defining good argument in digital context paper, that should help you kind of push yourself further. So with all that in mind, I really enjoyed this short piece of writing, and I'm looking forward to reading your longer, fuller working through in the major essay soon. Thanks.